theological statement that I submitted with my application to the congregation as part of my packet for consideration to be called as your minister. I sent it in 2010. I was called in 2011. And I wrote, if I had to narrowly define my theology, which I'll say this now, I can't say I narrowly defined my theology, but for purposes of this, I did. I would call myself a mystical humanist. The theological context of my call to Unitarian Universalist ministry is my realization that we are part of something greater than ourselves. Initially, reason and critical thinking led me to the theological position of humanism. And by using the word humanism, my understanding is that we as humans have the ability and the responsibility for learning about and understanding the purpose of our existence. I believe humanity has the ability to create and destroy, and thus we are responsible for the outcome of our actions. What we do with our life and how we do it matters. I remain a searcher of knowledge and wisdom, and I keep an open mind. I believe that there is much that is still unknown to us. Curiosity and persistence are strong traits of mine, and this keeps me open to experiences and knowledge that has allowed my theology to evolve. I've had personal experience that lead me to believe that there is something that makes us interconnected and interdependent with the rest of reality. In deep states of meditation and in walking a labyrinth, I have felt this connection to the larger universe. I believe when I am really in touch with my inner self, I am connected to the universe, and I see others and the environment around me more clearly. I become comfortable with who I am, and due to this, I am not defensive, and thus I am open to hearing and accepting the stories and the wisdom of others and connecting with them. It is in the awakening of these connections with others that I find and create meaning in life, end quote. So as we light our chalice, let its light be a symbol that connects us and leads us forward on our path of discernment. Please. So this past week, I attended a week-long retreat with the Shalem Institute for Spiritual Formation. It's the start of a year-long program entitled Going Deeper, Clergy, Spiritual Life, and Leadership. It's described in their brochure as follows, and I quote, Shalem's clergy program was created to address the challenges of balance, burnout, isolation, and multiple responsibilities with a desire to do everything perfectly. A life committed to spiritual practice is all too quickly overtaken by stress and time management issues. And this program provides an opportunity for clergy of all denominations to go deeper within themselves, to let go into their spiritual heart, and to open into what is being invited for themselves and their communities. Beneath the pressures of ministry, clergy find encouragement to unhook from stress, to be present, to rest in God's divine presence, and to receive and recover the prayerful ground of their spiritual center, end quote. So, every year during study leave, I do try to take some retreat. Sometimes it's a meditation retreat at a Buddhist monastery, or other times continuing education programs on justice issues or church management or worship. But this year, in reflecting over my 9 years here, I realized that I am not the same person I was when I entered ministry, and this congregation is not the same congregation it was when I arrived. I was originally called to ministry because Unitarian Universalism helped transform my life, and I wanted to share that with others. I believed and still believe that Unitarian Universalism can help transform people's lives and communities for the better in which we live. Now, once I started this journey to ministry many years ago, everything started to fall into place. Opportunities I needed opened up to me. An appropriate seminary opened in the city I lived the year I decided to apply. And then it closed 2 weeks after I graduated 8 years later. The company I worked for while I was in seminary was sold, and I received a bonus that allowed me to finish seminary and my internship without excessive debt. This ministry I was called to here in the Quad Cities was close to family that I had in the Midwest. And so it really just seemed to flow. And each and every year in review that the Committee on Ministry does of my ministry here, the one consistent recommendation every year has been my need to set better boundaries so I can maintain self-care. And I admit this is a challenge for me. There is so much need and suffering in the world. But there is truth to the safety instructions you hear when you get on an airplane when they say, place the oxygen mask on yourself before helping others. Although, to be honest, by that point, it is probably too late because the plane is going down. And so the key is preparation in advance, right? So make sure that the plane is in good shape. So I remember reading a book, a story about the author Jack London. He was a prolific writer. He wrote book after book, but he was not able to get them published. And finally, after years of frustration, someone published one of his books, and it became very, very successful. And of course, they were clamoring for more and more books from him. So he just started giving his publisher all the old books that had previously been rejected. And he had given everything he had to writing those books. And the frustration wore him down. You know, life can be like that sometimes. This is not just unique to writers or ministers, especially now with COVID and the ongoing assaults of the moral indignities happening in our country. It can get wearing on our souls. We keep giving and giving and giving of ourselves until we have nothing more to give. So it's important. It's important to constantly go back to the source of who we are, the source of why we do what we do, the source that helps us rise up in the morning to face the day with gratitude and excitement, and the source that allows us to gently fall asleep at night, knowing that our life has meaning. The source that makes you fall in love with life again and again and again. You know, for me, and I project for others, and I admit that's a projection, right? We all want our life to have meaning. The last few years of dealing with the aftermath of my cancer, and then this past year, which has had its particular stresses, I realized my well had run a bit dry. And so for me, it's helpful to take myself out of the day-to-day, to separate myself, to discern and remember what it was that led me to ministry, which is why I went back to that original writing, to remember what it was that called me and still does call me. And spending time trying to transform others and transform communities, I stopped transforming myself, which is not entirely true. I mean, we are always changed by what we encounter. But there was more going out than coming in, and it wasn't always intentional. And this is something we have to be careful about because there is so much need in the world. There's so much need even in our families. I think of all our families here at the congregation, many of whom, you know, now have all of a sudden become homeschool teachers. Some of you already had been, but now more of you are. or you have to be worried about sending your child to school, which I understand, at least in Davenport's been delayed a couple of weeks now. We have to remember to take time to fill up our own gas tank, or we will find ourselves out of gas on the highway of life. You know, nowadays you have a cell phone. If you run out of gas on the highway, you have a cell phone. I remember when I was young and I ran out of gas, I had to decide between walking 2 miles in the snow to the nearest gas station or waiting and freezing in the car, waiting for somebody to get me. And, you know, grit and tenacity will only take us so far. And so, again, the being prepared, the doing the preparation work, that is why we come together as a congregation to offer our gifts to each other, to fill each other up with life, to care for each other, to hold each other accountable, to love each other, to connect with our source of being, and then sharing it, discerning it, and guiding it within an accountable community. You know, being with clergy of other denominations is also a reminder of how lucky we are to recognize how pluralism, even with its challenges, truly enriches us. How each of us can be our authentic self, to be who we are, and to state what we believe without worry about what the person next to us or the minister thinks, what our theological beliefs are, at least what we agree to in community. And that's the key point, right? That's our boundary. And ultimately, that is what we are searching for, to be our authentic self and to express ourselves authentically in the most grounded, contemplative way. As well, one of my Buddhist teachers, Roshi Joan Halifax, says, soft front, firm back. Soft front, to be open to hearing and accepting the stories and wisdom of others and connecting with others. And a firm back, to know what our boundaries are and to respect them. And so with reverence for openness and respect, as we go into our offering, I ask you to share some of your financial gifts with us so that we may be able to continue our journey together fully and to reach out to others who also need us. So now I ask you to get into a comfortable position for some silent reflection. I'm going to invite you to sit quietly for just a moment. Maybe recognize the beauty around you in whatever way that you can notice beauty. Maybe that's a smile on someone's face, a picture on the wall, the beauty of some imperfection. If you're outside, maybe focus on the leaves swaying in the trees. Any image that puts you in a more peaceful frame of mind. Do whatever helps you to be open, aware, relaxed. Close your eyes if you're comfortable. Maybe gaze softly then at the floor once you have that image in your mind. Take a couple of deep breaths. Notice if there's any tension in your body, and if so, relax it. As you sit quietly, I invite you to recall a time when you felt spiritually grounded or felt a calmness in your life, where you felt you were the person you were called to be. Sit quietly. Let that memory rise up. As you sit with this memory, recall sights, sounds, maybe even smells associated with that memory. Picture the faces of other people maybe who were involved. Recall how you were feeling, both physically and emotionally at that moment. What were the characteristics of that experience? What emotions come to mind? I invite you to slowly come back to the present moment. If you're comfortable, I invite you to write a word or two about what came up for you in that meditation. If you'd like, you can send it to me as a private chat. I will not identify you. But let us now understand to go deep into the sound of silence. The first week of my year-long program was supposed to be in person at a really nice retreat center in Maryland. Instead, it was 7 days, 6 hours a day in Zoom sessions, and included a full day of silence as well. Now, I'll just say a full day of silence is much harder at home than in a beautiful wooded retreat center, because I have to tell you, I am terrible at the game of charades, just terrible. And so, of course, being at home, my family asked me a question. I resorted to sort of like texting them my answers. So, although maybe I kept to the letter of the rules about silence, probably not in the spirit of the rules. I probably should have been more silent on social media and other electronics. But the other clergy that were with me were from quite diverse backgrounds and denominations. My classes, among others, included discernment, both personal and congregationally, and how to integrate a contemplative way of being into my life and into the life of the congregation. And a good part of it was self-reflective to better understand my renewed call to ministry. It was a discussion and experiences of contemplative practices, including Lectio Divina, an intentional way of reading sacred text, guided meditations, chanting, mindful walking, spiritual guidance. It did occur to me that almost all of the contemplative practices span multiple religious traditions. And so I keep an eye out. There will be some new programming this fall, in addition to the Book of Joy. But again, to ask, to what end do we do all this? And for me, it is the cultivation and education of the heart. The goal of many spiritual deepening practices is to get us out of the head and into the heart, to hear our conscience speak, and to have the courage to let it lead us. And now for many, as it was really interesting to find out in my class, right, a lot of that is culturally driven. Traditionally, many of us think of that as sitting in silent meditation. For others, it may be a walk in the woods. For others, it may be ecstatic music. Or for others, like we have here or did before COVID, a monthly drumming. The key is to listen to that still small voice within. And by cultivation of the heart, I do not mean desire, like I really want that ice cream that's in the freezer, but an inner knowing, a place where you act from your best self, a place where you know who you are and you can act without defensiveness, a place where you are in what I would call the zone, And you do not have to think about every little thing, but rather what you do and say comes naturally to you because it is you. A place where time often feels like it stands still. A place where you do not have to code switch to be understood or to fit in. You're accepted for who you are and how you are. It's always hard. It is to live in this place, in this space. Right? Sometimes the world we live in just makes it impossible. I understand that. But it is also the hard that makes it beautiful, the hard that makes it great. When I do experience it, there is a calmness, a knowing that what is being done is right. And that feeling, that place of wholeness can be cultivated. Sometimes it requires us to get out of our own way, to break out of our conditioned life. The author Parker Palmer writes, and I quote, "Our deepest calling is to grow into our own authentic selfhood, whether or not it conforms to some image of who we ought to be." And sometimes that image is from us or from the world. Go back. As we do so, we will not only find the joy that every human being seeks, we will also find our path of authentic service in the world. True vocation joins self and service. As Frederick Buechner asserts when he defines vocation as the place where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need, end quote. Ultimately, spiritual deepening comes down to seeing yourself as part of something larger than just yourself. For some, that may be a divinity. For others, it might be an ideal, such as justice. For others, wisdom. For others, congregational religious life. Or the garden. There may be many things, right? But it's a matter of seeing that's beyond just who we are and our personal needs. Seeing ourselves as part of something larger requires us to let go of our image of ourselves as being in control. Like even at the beginning of this service, right? One of our tech people said, "You need to make me the host." And I was like, oh, I don't want to give up the control of being the host, right? Like that thought flashed through my mind, right? But then, of course, I let it go because it doesn't have to be me, right? And we're always stronger together. And I want to say it's not about letting go of the ego. We all need a healthy ego to survive. But often the ego and thus ourselves become the sole focal point of life. And we end up acting in ways that harm others in a way to fortify our ego. And one of the teachers in the program compared an individual or an organization with a semi-permeable membrane in our body. Something I thought I would never say in service. But these semi-permeable membranes, which we all have in our bodies, right? If it's too rigid and doesn't have necessary openings, nutrients cannot get in and toxins cannot get out. And if that happens, a cell will atrophy and shrivel up and die or explode. But if the membrane is permeable, maintaining healthy boundaries, then life can flourish. And isn't that what we want? To have a life that can flourish? Being permeable sometimes seems counterintuitive. Thinking about times you've felt threatened, right? We tend to tighten up, right? We get hard, we close in on ourselves, we circle the wagons, to bring another metaphor in, right? Our lizard mind takes over and we get defensive. But I invite you, when you feel threatened or some idea that you have feels threatened, to not resist that feeling. This does not mean you have to roll over and die. I think often the spiritual idea of surrender has that connotation. But being soft, right? I told you what my Roshi said, right? A soft front. Being soft allows you to bypass that lizard brain response and connect with your true inner self. Being soft allows you to see and understand the situation and allows you to better and more calmly and clearly make decisions. Being soft allows you to see the right path and then allows you to act with courage because you know it's the right path. Because then you know you are acting from authenticity. And in the end, we are known by our fruits. I think Jesus said that too. We are known by how we act in the world. Are we compassionate, caring people yearning for justice for all? This is embedded in our principles. The journey is both inward and outward. If it is only inward, if we are only self-reflective, then we risk narcissism, which is a protection of the ego. But if we only go outward and do not do the inward work, we will surely burn out. Our congregation can be a school for learning compassion and hope and action, where we support each other on our journey together. And I want to just say that action can be many things. Many of you, it's building a garden that provides food for those in need, right? It doesn't have to be marching in the streets or starting a revolution. It could be that too, though. This is the most excellent adventure that we are on. And as I start my 10th year with you, I am genuinely excited about what a new future holds for this congregation in Unitarian Universalism. Because right now, it's all going to have to be new. And so we all have to come together and create this new thing, this new beautiful thing together. So let us be a semi-permeable membrane and be open to the nutrients of life while eliminating toxicity. May it be so.